The Dallas Mavericks lucked themselves out in every single way, jumping all the way from pick 13 to pick 1 in the NBA draft lottery after a disaster season where they traded away their franchise player to the Los Angeles Lakers. And we saved the Dallas Mavericks here for last of all the teams in the lottery because they're the most team to talk about. They probably have the most sentiment around them, potential trades, potential draft propositions. What will Nico Harrison do? So we're going to dive in and explore the Dallas Mavericks offseason, and one that I think they lucked themselves into, but are very gracious to find themselves in. We're going to be diving and exploring on them. If you are a Dallas Mavericks fan, if this is your first time tuning in, let me know your thoughts on the video down below. And if you are a fan of this series, make sure to check out the other teams because, like I mentioned, we've talked about every other single team that has been in the lottery in the playlist. So if you definitely want to check those teams out, definitely go ahead and let's dive in on the Mavericks. So lo and behold, the Dallas Mavericks here. Let's look at them. Finished 10th in the Western Conference, 39-43. Struggling season, dealt with some injuries. Kyrie Irving went down halfway through the year with a torn ACL. Is going to be out for the start of this season. A lot of question marks surrounding that. But not only just that, the Dallas Mavericks made the craziest move, trading away their franchise cornerstone player in Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis. But it was all rewarded when the Dallas Mavericks were able to have the lottery balls fall in their favor and land the number 1 overall pick to once again get that top tier talent. As we all know, the number 1 overall pick, who is projected to be and what his standings are going to be. We'll get into him in just a little bit. But looking at this graphic, courtesy of Bobby Marks from ESPN, once again, shout out to Bobby Marks and the people that do these graphics 100%. You can see that Dallas Mavericks are over the tax threshold, not really compared to some of these other teams in the lottery, but sitting at $200 million, $13 million over the tax threshold, but are and above the first apron, but are underneath the second apron at this very moment. With some key free agents, guys like Spencer Dinwiddie, Dante Exum, and even Kyrie Irving with a player option, it's going to be difficult for this Mavericks team to really reconstruct their roster. We all know as well that they have an abundance of centers and front court players, and with those being on the market, I could see the Dallas Mavericks potentially trading them. But like I mentioned, Dallas is projected to get number 11, jumped all the way, to pick number 1 here. Just absolutely insanity to see from the Dallas Mavericks. Props to them for being able to do so, but once again, the Mavericks lucked into the situation. So let's dive in and let's explore who I think they could potentially trade from their team this offseason. So the biggest name to really look at, I think in my eyes, is PJ Washington, and for a lot of reasons of so. If we want to look at this front court once again, right? PJ Washington, Anthony Davis, Najee Marshall, Derek Lively, Caleb Martin, Daniel Gafford, not all these guys are going to be here, right? The Mavericks need some scoring, they need some shooting. Klay Thompson was a great veteran add that they added in free agency, but a guy in PJ Washington, I feel like can command that on the open market. Once again, he's on an expiring deal, so teams looking to take a flyer on Washington to have him potentially be a building block for their franchise could obviously jump in on it, but also Washington has a lot of his aspects of game that he's been able to develop since going to Dallas post-Washington, and really looks like a solid role player on, a winning team or potentially even a championship level squad if he could be a solid knockdown three-point shooter, unlike he was in the finals just last year. But Washington has that bright upside of that being a really compatible either role player or starting piece. But not only just that, like I mentioned, is on an expiring contract. So if a team is looking to trade away or trade for a guy like PJ Washington, they can kind of buy in on him on the low and then ultimately kind of experiment what that filler role really looks like for this team down the line. And when we discuss some teams the Dallas Mavericks get involved in with trades, I think PJ Washington really aligns to one of those squads. Once again, we're talking about this front court, so might as well look at Daniel Gafford. He was brought into the Dallas Mavericks once again just last season at the trade deadline when the Mavericks went big swinging, getting Daniel Gafford for Luka Doncic, going and getting PJ Washington, and really bolstering this team for their finals run. But since trading away a guy, obviously, in Luka Doncic, Daniel Gafford's role and fit for this team doesn't really mix. Obviously, added to the fact that they have their number 12 overall pick from a couple years ago, or top 10 pick, in Derek Lively, who's been a solid rim-protecting younger center on a rookie contract. It makes more sense to keep him and allow Anthony Davis to play the 4 position. Therefore, I do believe that Daniel Gafford's time here in Dallas is on the ends here. Once again, he's a solid fringe starting big, I think, or a solid role player starting big at this point. Maybe he's not a top 10, but top 15, top 20 big, and that can hold your own in the NBA if you do secure a guy in Daniel Gafford. Once again, I believe it was a 1-1 year on his deal, but $12 million. Solid rim protector, low post player. I think a lot of teams are going to look to value a guy in Daniel Gafford, and for a team in Dallas who's looking to make an upgrade at a certain position, I think guys like Daniel Gafford and or PJ Washington could be combined in a deal to get one, or one of them could be used to net them that point guard that they are looking for. So now that we discussed the possible trade people that could be left from Dallas, let's look at the draft. Obviously, they're picking number 1. I don't see them trading out of number 1. Even with Nico Harrison's deranged understanding of Luka Doncic and how to build a team and what to do and defense matters first and all this type of stuff, I don't think passing on a player in Cooper Flag is the right move for the Dallas Mavericks. And once again, he can kind of seemingly fit in. Once again, they do have a lot of wings, so it does look a little bit questionable for guys like PJ Washington, maybe even a guy like Najee Marshall down the line. But a guy like Cooper Flag, in my opinion, I think is the obvious clear number 1 pick and will fit well alongside a guy named Anthony Davis, Derek Lively, Kyrie Irving, and etc. He's going to be a solid building block to really keep this Dallas Maverick team afloat and still in contention. Now, Flag obviously isn't going to take this team over the top. They're not going to be a top 2, top 3 seed in the West next season, but definitely expect them to be exciting, enticing, and a solid middle of the pack team in the West. And with Flag's development, even with guys like Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving getting older, there are going to be younger stars that are going to want to come play with Cooper, and Dallas is just going to be another destination once again. I really like this move for Dallas. Obviously, they lucked into it, but landing Cooper Flag at 1, definitely don't think twice about it. Don't trade back. Even if a team is interested in Flag, is offering to give you the number 2 pick, don't do it. Take Cooper Flag. This is the right pick for you. So now that we discussed who I think the Mavericks could trade from their roster and looking at some potential pieces, let's look at who the Mavericks could bring into this team. And like I mentioned earlier, the Mavericks are looking for a point guard. They made that known with Mark Stein's reporting, where he works for DLS Mavs, or the Dallas Mavericks Insider, and he had some names. And the 3 names that we're going to be looking at are presented here. So the first one we're going to be looking at is Jrue Holiday. And Jrue Holiday makes sense for the Mavericks for a lot of reasons. One, he can be that filler point guard and kind of step up to take that role. We saw with Jrue Holiday in Boston, he always played a sacrificial role, playing alongside guys like Tatum, Brown, Porzingis, White, Pritchard, Horford, etc. He never got to release his full potential on the offensive side. And even though he did step back a little bit on his offensive side this season from Boston, shooting worse in the corner 3-point percentage, he still can be a productive offensive player, but mind you, one of the better defensive point guards in the league. And you pair that alongside Kyrie Irving, who can play the number 2 in your role and can play the shooting guard, as we've seen alongside Luka Doncic as that secondary off-ball creator. We know that this fit can work even better than a Luka and Kyrie Irving fit, in my opinion. His defense is going to be able to compensate Kyrie's offense, and they're going to be a match made in heaven. The only problem is how does Boston, necessarily get the value back in a deal? Well, obviously, it would revolve around those guys that we mentioned. Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington. Makes sense. But Boston is not looking to take back all that salary. They're looking to shed salary in a deal. So look out for a 3-team trade, maybe one of those guys in Gafford or Washington getting sent somewhere else, and one of them being sent to Boston. But I could see Boston valuing both from either one of those guys, as Washington can fill in for that Tatum role, Gafford could fill in for that Porzingis role if they do look to move off of him, or maybe even a Luke Cornett if they lose him in free agency. And Jrue Holiday can be an immediate impact piece for the Dallas Mavericks right away. And then when Kyrie Irving comes back, he can take that sacrificial role once again, being that solid role player and solid starter alongside Kyrie, AD, Najee Marshall, Cooper Flag, Derek Lively, whoever they decide to keep. Now, this one's a little bit cheaper for them, and I think this is a move that they make if they realize they can't get Jrue Holiday, or the asking price for Jrue Holiday is way too high. I feel like Jrue Holiday is their main guy that they're going to want to go and get. They have the money to go do so. They have the contracts to trade to go do so, and they need a point guard. It makes sense. But Lonzo also makes sense, but just at a cheaper value. Makes around $10 million compared to Jrue Holiday's 43 or 34. Excuse me if I'm messing that up. But with a guy in Lonzo Ball, it's a little bit easier, right? $10 million, a little bit of an easy tradable contract. When you look at the deals that they could, technically move to get a guy like that, it becomes a little bit more easier. Maybe a Najee Marshall, maybe a PJ Washington, maybe a Caleb Martin and all of your Maxence Prosper to get a guy like Lonzo Ball. And I think Lonzo, once again, kind of fills in that role that Jrue Holiday plays. Obviously, the injury concerns with Jrue Holiday from last year linger a little bit more with Lonzo Ball, as he's had a little bit more time off dealing with his knee injury, and there's no for sure certain that he's going to get back to his best ability before he had those knee injuries. But Lonzo Ball at his peak was a solid, and I mean very solid, point guard, kind of similar to a guy like Daniel Gafford, one of those top 15, top 20 guys that is going to hold your own and be a solid contributor, playmaker, defender, scorer from three-point range. And if Lonzo can do all those things alongside Kyrie Irving and be another facilitator alongside of him to give lob threats to Anthony Davis, Najee Marshall, even to pass down low to Derek Lively, I think this is another key piece for the Mavs to be interested in. And then the last one, probably the one that makes the least most amount of sense, but I still think does make a fit, is Chris Paul. And Chris Paul, obviously, being the veteran that he is looking to still stay on relevant teams and still be competitive. But we don't know what Chris Paul's main motive is. Is Chris Paul going to go chase a ring? Is he going to go on the end of a bench to go do that? Or will he rather be a developmental guy similar to last year with San Antonio, where he knows the Spurs aren't going to make the playoffs, but he wants to help develop the growth and make not himself look like a better player, but make other guys like Victor Wembanyama, De'Aaron Fox, Castle, all look like better players, in my opinion. I think a guy like Chris Paul would definitely entertain the idea of Dallas, not only for them being competitive, but he can kind of slot in as that backup point guard once again. And if they do go and get Alonzo Ball, right, they can get Lonzo and Chris Paul, and have both of those guys kind of fill in that supplemental role for Jrue Holiday if they don't want to go big star hunting, don't want to fry out all those checks. One benefit of Chris Paul as well is he is a free agent, so you do have the money, but the Suns may have to shed some of that money in order to be able to offer Chris Paul a contract. So keep an eye out for Chris Paul with this team. Like I mentioned, doesn't make them, in my opinion, wouldn't be the perfect fit. I think the other two guys are a little bit better for what Dallas wants to do. But if Chris Paul wants to go to Dallas, once again, was in San Antonio last year, doesn't want to move his kids, wants to stay in the same state, this kind of makes some sense for the team. And then one free agent that I really want to talk about with this Dallas Mavericks team is Dante Exum. As my boy Marcel over on Mavs Digest, go and check him out if you haven't, had a little bit of a tweet about him, and it made me keep my eyes on Dante Exum, as he's been a key piece for this Dallas Mavericks team as a 3-and-D defender, as another playmaker, as a solid guard for this roster, and can really play multiple positions for this team. Now, he is getting some look out on the open market, as, like I mentioned, he is a free agent here this offseason alongside Spencer Dinwiddie. And I think that raises a big concern or issue for the Dallas Mavericks, as, once again, he's one of their better defenders, and I think he could still fit like a glove on this roster. The only problem is, like we mentioned with Dallas, is they're nearing a second apron team, and they don't want to be that. So how can they kind of do this? Well, once again, look to set some salary and some other moves and try to get some things done to be able to have that flexibility to bring back Dante Exum. Because at this moment, if they were to renegotiate a deal with Dante Exum, they would have to be in the second apron, and that is something that the Dallas Mavericks are not looking to be doing. But like I mentioned, Dallas Mavericks really lucked into this position here, but I'm very interested to see where they go this offseason. I think they're going to be a solid team in the Eastern Conference. Like I mentioned, you get that point guard, regardless if it's Lonzo, Chris Paul, Jrue Holiday, I think is the best fit for them ultimately. Or Jrue Holiday, Kyrie Irving, Cooper Flagg, Anthony Davis, and Derek Lively lineup, I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, is scary. Not added to the fact that they have Klay Thompson coming off the bench, potentially Najee Marshall coming off the bench, and any other young assets or potential free agents or players that they go out and get. This Dallas Mavericks team is going to be scary. Nico Harrison, even though he didn't make the right move in trading Luka Doncic, definitely has a better vision of what his team can be for the fans, and ultimately, that's great if you're a Dallas Mavericks fan. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Let me know what you guys ultimately think on the Mavericks, and if I did them right or if I did them wrong. Once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out.